Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable with Faithful Chapman. Today, I am doing another update on the Nolan Wells case. You guys, so many new things and new developments have been happening, and it's been difficult for me to keep up with everything. So what we're going to do is I'm going to try to consolidate 1 to 3 new developments regarding this case all into one video. The first thing, I have a question. Does anybody know where Ben Crump is? I don't know. I was just wondering because ever since the whites, right, have decided to fight back against all of his race hustling shenanigans, he's been eerily quiet. Now, I'm not trying to be, okay, yes, I am. I am trying to be purposefully inflammatory, but the only reason why that is because, like I told y'all in a few videos ago, white guilt is dead. And I'm glad to see it because first of all, it was just beginning to get embarrassing. Okay. I was embarrassed for the whites because for so long you allowed these remedial, right, educable, mentally retarded civil rights apparatus race hustlers guilt you out of your money, have you on your knees begging and groveling and wearing kente cloth and making videos like this.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
Every not so funny joke. Every unfair stereotype.
Every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small.
Every time I remained silent.
Every time I explained away police brutality. Or turned a blind eye.
I take responsibility. Black people are being slaughtered in the streets, killed in their own homes. These are our brothers and sisters.
Our friends, our family. We are done watching them die. We are no longer bystanders. We will not be idle. Enough is enough.
Now, do you see why? Look, that's pathetic. Okay, those are people that should be pitied, not respected. And so now that the respect is coming back to the whites community, I want to talk about it as it relates to this Nolan Wells case. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to take a look at this clip.
So I'm going to call it what it is, lies. So the first thing that's really important here is we're dealing with lies and liars. We're dealing with profiteers. We're dealing with hustlers. But for the tragedy to then be magnified after his death for no reason other than profit is a disgrace, or what we would call a shanda. There is no possible way that anybody could have committed a murder in broad daylight on a barren, windswept island that is narrow and was just swamped with people that day in broad daylight. It's just not possible given the natural environment there. And that leads me to the next point, which is this. Once you know what the timeline is, when you combine the timeline with the actual dynamics of the island itself, all of the lies completely unravel because it isn't possible, and here's why. Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it. They were gone. That is not open for debate. So that's a fact. They were gone. And at that time, Nolan Wells was still alive. Now, I'm not going to name them out of respect for their privacy, but just as one example, there are 2 very fine, upstanding members of the Ocean Springs community who saw Nolan Wells at about 10 minutes to 6 p.m. So about an hour and a half after these fine young men had left the island. They were gone, departed. Nolan Wells was alive. And these 2 witnesses, 2 very reliable, very credible, and very upstanding members of the community, they saw Nolan. And they've known Nolan for years. There's no chance that they made a mistake. And by the way, this can be corroborated through other evidence, other eyewitness accounts. And that's the end of it right there. That's before we get into everything else about the situation.
So, you guys, this is bombshell information. Embarrassing, not for these gentlemen, but for the pro wokey woke blackity blacks. Yes, this is embarrassing because it completely shatters the race narrative that one black boy and 3 or 4 white boys and nobody saw nothing. Somebody knows something.
Because it's not adding up. It's just not adding up. I mean, you had this 18-year-old kid who went out celebrating on the 4th of July with his friends on a boat. And tragically, they all came back, but Nolan didn't. And Nolan was the only African American in the group. And so it is making people harken back to the sins of the past in the state of Mississippi. And so I think that's why people are so concerned with getting to the truth. People are so concerned with getting to the truth.
And then I know, listen, I am trying very, very hard not to pile up too bad on Miss Christine Wansley. But listen, this woman is not beyond being held accountable because of the severity of and the severity of the damage that her public statements have caused. She does not get to hide behind the shield of my son. I'm grieving my son, so therefore I get to be reckless with my words. What do I mean? It is Nolan Wells' mother who, without a tear in her eye, stood before an audience of a plethora of black people and affirmatively said that we as black parents or black people need to make sure that we are teaching our children how to navigate in certain spaces when there are people there who don't look like them. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but this is her actually making that statement. Take a listen.
We have to have tough conversations. This is something our community already knows. We have to make sure that, and I know my husband and I, we have had countless conversations with all of our children about the importance of understanding when you are moving in different spaces with people that do not look like you. And it's unfortunate that we have to have these conversations, but they are needed in order to hopefully keep our children safe. So I would say to all the mothers out there, especially my black mothers, we just have to keep pushing forward. We have to do the things to protect our children.
When you make a statement like that, you have to bear the responsibility of the implications of what you were implying. Now, this gentleman that we saw in this clip, if I am not mistaken, is representative of the legal counsel representing these 3 young men who have had to do these interviews with Brandon Tatum because I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have trusted anybody else to tell their story. And he's basically, it's too much like right. This is making way too much sense. And the cognitive dissonance from the side of this discussion that has wanted this to be a white lynching so bad, I'm trying to figure out, is this enough to silence the cries of racism or no? There's got to be some other explanation. We just heard this man explain that 2 people of upstanding stature in this community saw Nolan Wells and they knew Nolan Wells and they were able to identify and remember seeing him well after the boat with these gentlemen that were on it had already left. So why is it that this narrative continues to be pushed? Why is it that these young men continue to have their characters dragged through the court of public opinion when the facts do not support the assertions that were started by Al Sharpton? Oh, please believe, Al, you are not off the hook. Just because you've been quiet and you disappeared and went MIA after all the money started rolling in and you got your cut, you are still on the hook too, and you need to be held accountable.
The father of one of the young men that was with Nolan Wells on the boat that he went out to Horn Island with, and did the three of them, white gentlemen came back, white young men came back without him, is threatening to sue or attack many of us, or some of us, particularly, I don't know who he's suing, but he's attacked Ben Crump, the lawyer, and me by name. I think it is interesting because, first of all, I don't know what his suit would be. As for me, if he was referring to me, and I'm not sure, I would welcome a suit because, one, I've not called anybody's name, I don't know their name. But second, if he would come forward with someone that said they were defamed, then I would be able to depose them, get their phone logs, and try to get some answers for this family.
And not just Al, you also have Ben Crump. Ben Crump is the one that was making all these inflammatory statements, introducing race into the narrative when there was no evidence or facts to support or point to that race had anything to do with what may or may not have happened to Nolan Wells. I like how this individual points out, he called them, he said, what we are dealing with are lies. We are dealing with liars, and we are dealing with hustlers, people who make a living exploiting and profiting off of other people's pain. I like how this attorney here is openly advocating for his clients, and he's not apologizing for his whiteness. He's not apologizing for anything. He is simply walking in the light and allowing the truth to prevail. But why is it that the other side, we've caught them in multiple lies, they won't do any interviews to allow this side to examine their claims, and instead of addressing the questions, we get public statements like, oh, that's just a distraction. Yeah, Ben Crump wants to assert that him possibly being sued for defamation is a distraction because he wants to distract from the fact that he's been caught in multiple lies.
Why did the founding fathers in America have slaves? Why did black men allow themselves to be slaves? That's my question. Now why? Don't I pick cotton for the white man, but my great-great-grandfather did. You know what? It's simple. I refuse. And if you try to make me, I'm gonna bust a cap in your head. Black people begging to be included in places where they will not want it. It is unchristian, it is unmanly. The Christian man never be anywhere where he's not wanted, or anywhere where he's really tolerated. Any place that makes him feel small. If I'm not invited, I don't want to be there. And this is what you get from it: ridicule and pity.
And I'm scared. Scared.
Never me. As I've said before, there are two types of men. One that says that I will accept slavery before death, and the other one that says I will accept death before slavery. You had a choice. Kill him or die. That's the choice. Always. Kill him or die. Slavery is a choice.
We need to take a look at another clip to expose some more lies and inconsistencies. This post is from Sarah Fields. Let me tell you something. Sister Sarah Fields is doing the Lord's work. She is on top of this case, and she has been one of the, if not the most trusted investigative, independent journalistic resource that we know that we can rely on as it relates to this case. Because let me explain something. See, Sarah strikes me as one of the white women that's like, look, I ain't racist, but I'm tired of you blacks. I'm tired of your lies. I'm tired of your accusations. And I'm tired of you guys getting away with all of your nefarious deeds while white people are expected to just sit back and let you dominate the conversation and curate the narrative that benefits you. Sarah said, heck to the no, I am fighting back. So take a look at this tweet. This tweet right here says, not long after July 6th, Al Sharpton told TMZ that Nolan's phone had been wiped clean All of his photos, text messages, everything on the phone had been erased. Now, Sarah's not a sloppy journalist. So when she put this in quotes, are we safe to assume that this is a direct quote from the Reverend Al Sharpton? Well, I think that it is. She goes on to say the authorities were never given Nolan's phone. Wait a minute.
Flag on the plate.
How are you determined to get to the truth and you want a thorough investigation, yet the authorities do not have Nolan's phone? I'm sorry, I'm just asking questions. Christine Wells never turned it over. Therefore, the claim that anything was erased will always remain an unproven and unsupported allegation. If anything was actually erased, Sarah goes on to say, as they asserted, they clearly didn't care enough to have it investigated, or it wasn't his friends who erased it. Somebody's lying. Now, I'm not saying here that the grieving mama here is a liar, but if I say that I just want to know what happened to my son, I want justice to prevail, I am interested in the truth, one of the first things I would have done is handed over my son's phone so that it could be submitted to a forensic investigation. However, if a statement like this is already made and then the phone is handed over, you do realize that they'll be able to see when and at what time forensically if something was erased. Well, if things didn't start getting erased until after Nolan Wells was found and his body was discovered, and until after the phone was in the possession of the mama, maybe, just maybe, I'm not saying, I can't affirm or deny if this is a statement of truth or fact or not. But it would seem to me that maybe the phone didn't get turned over because the people who erased what was on the phone were not the people that were implicated in having something to do with Nolan Wells' death. This is why I said, y'all got mad when I said these blacks are not honest. When a family associates themselves with the likes of an Al Sharpton or a Ben Crump, it's because they have the same spirit, that same money-hungry, grifting, lying, exploitative, narrative curation spirit. They all got the same spirit. And that's why they're all promoting more lies and more racial division and wanting all of the spotlight and the attention and the whole crux of this story to be centered around race, when race doesn't have anything to do with this. This is so horrible and this is so wicked that it has gotten to this point, all because of the promise of riches. All because instead of allowing the investigation to ensue and for you to get peace and closure and rest in knowing that, you know what, maybe my son drowned. Maybe something happened, my son took something, or maybe he had a heart attack. Like, we really don't know what happened. But to implicate and attempt to destroy the lives of others just because it fits your racial narrative is so evil and wicked. And you will be held accountable for such deeds. My question is, do you think we're ever going to get an apology from Ben Crump or Al Sharpton or from Christine Wells for the narrative that they pushed into the media, for the inflammatory and harmful statements that she made about, well, you know, black people need to talk to their kids about, you know, moving in spaces where people don't look like them? Why? Why? Why now? Why all of a sudden now we have to be on a heightened alert and talk to our children about navigating spaces with people who don't look like them, when the last time I checked, the only time I've had to have a conversation with my children about being careful, it wasn't in spaces navigating with people who don't look like them. I can tell you that. I absolutely have had to give a disclaimer about the Taquations and the Jaquariuses of the community, though. But see, Did I say that? Did I say that out loud? Oh, see, you're not supposed to say that. See, that's the truth. But what they want you to do is believe that the racist white boogeyman is around the corner and they're hunting down your young men, and that your young men can't be friends with people who don't look like them, when from all the evidence I've seen, this friend group that Nolan Wells had in his circle was probably the best friend group that he could have been associated with. There's nothing that we've been publicly given information to be privy to make us think that these young boys were either a bad influence on Nolan or were out to do a harm to Nolan. That there's just no evidence to support that. So my question is, are we ever going to get an explanation as to why the phone was never turned over? Are we ever going to get an explanation as to why Al Sharpton would imply that all of his photos, text messages, and everything on the phone had been erased? Are we going to get some clarity as to what were you trying to imply? Were you trying to imply that the white boys erased it? Or is this going to be one of those plausible deniability things that I didn't say who erased it? And then under your breath, you're going to be like, well, we do know that the mama erased it, but the way we framed it, we kind of just put it out there and we allowed the public to think what they want. Are these young men, all I want to know is, are they going to get an apology, or will we see you in court as you defend yourself against all of the defamatory statements and claims and innuendos and insinuations that you've made to implicate these young men in an effort to do nothing but to stoke the flames of racism and to destroy their lives in perpetuity? Are we going to get an apology? Miss Christine, are you going to apologize? Like Christine Wells could have been the main person to shut all this foolishness down. Let me explain to you the power of the black woman. Now, I know black women, we think we queens, and then we all know, I don't believe in the narrative that we are queens. But in this circumstance, this is the one person, unfortunately, because of the power of the black woman in media today, she could have been the one to shut this whole thing down and to shift the tide in the narrative and calm everybody down. All Christine had to do was say, listen, I am grieving my son, but this community's been nothing but great for me. It's been a great place to raise my kids, and I'm not going to allow anyone to tarnish the names or reputations of any of these young men, because the facts have not come out, and anybody that's doing that should be ashamed of yourself, and you should be embarrassed. Cut it out. Quit making the videos. Quit the conspiracy theories. You don't think that Black Twitter and the black side of the TikTok, they would have been, the queen has spoken. Y'all, let's fall back. Now, you might still have had some brain dead morons still do it, but for the most part, this story would not have gotten as big and as polarizing as it did if she would have disassociated herself or failed to associate herself with Ben Crump from the beginning and shut all of this down. But she didn't. You know why? Because she wanted the attention. She wanted the notoriety. In her mind, in my opinion, she may have her sights set on a whole Netflix film deal, a book deal. There's something in it for this woman for why she would carry on like this and have all of this false information out there, but refuse to shut it down. Won't even acknowledge, we're not even going to talk about that man, talking about Brandon Tatum. And has not levied not one apology to Nolan's friends. This is why I believe Nolan would be sick right now if he knew that this is the direction that the investigation to get to the bottom of what happened to him. He would be mortified if he knew. Incredibly disappointed. The last thing I want to show you guys. Take a look at this tweet. Sarah goes, some of the biggest news in the Nolans, oh Lord, some of the biggest news in the Nolan Wells case dropped yesterday when my exclusive revealed that Nolan's cell phone has never been surrendered to authorities. Crump ignored it. Instead, he posts this nonsense. Why? Because he thinks accountability isn't coming for him. He thinks he can continue pushing whatever narrative he wants while completely ignoring legitimate questions that directly contradict the story he has helped sell to the public. And he knows a certain low IQ subculture of people will believe his lies without question. He thinks he doesn't owe them or anyone else an explanation. That it's the arrogance for me. It's these ethnically narcissistic people are so arrogant and they're so high off of their own supply that I am inclined, I have to agree with Sarah Fields here. She is right. She goes, but he does. You don't get to spend weeks demanding answers, insinuating foul play, fueling suspicion, and demanding accountability from everyone else while refusing to answer questions about evidence in your own client's possession. If Nolan's cell phone was important enough to publicly raise suspicions about alleged deleted content, then whether that phone was ever surrendered to law enforcement matters. Bingo. Crump can ignore the question. He can pretend the reporting doesn't exist, but he cannot make the truth go away. He has finally met his match when it comes to people like me and Brandon Tatum, who will never let up and will always make sure you know the truth. Come on here. Come on. Come on through here, Sarah Fields and Brandon Tatum. Y'all are out here doing the Lord's work. Look at the smoke screen that Ben Crump posts to sidestep accountability. He wants to pull on your heartstrings once again. Y'all got to understand the ethnic narcissist. This is a form of when it's a technique where they use where they project and they, in order to move your attention away from what they're doing, they do stuff like this. I can't think of the term right now. If it comes to me, I'll just blurt it out. He posts, these photos tell the story of 18 cherished years. To Nolan Wells' mother, Christine, he was known for his quiet nature, his corny jokes, and his gentle smile. The little things that made Nolan who he was. He grew into a multi-sport athlete, a beloved teammate, and a young man who his family says had a gentle, calming spirit. As we continue seeking answers about what happened to Nolan, we also want the world to remember the life he lived and the young man his family loved so deeply. Nolan's story is about more than how his life ended. It's about who he was. I hope y'all know that Ben Crump here is he done pulled out the baby violin and he's trying to move away from the conspiracy. Say, listen, yeah, his story is about how his life ended, but what's more important, it's about who he was. Let's just focus on the life that Nolan lived. Oh, no. You don't get to do that, Crumpy. Ben Crump, you don't get to do that. You know why? Because you spent all this time implicating several white young men, implying that somebody knows something and being on an island when you're the only black person with all these white people in Mississippi burning, all of that. No. See, this is what you were supposed to be doing at the beginning so that we could mourn and focus and celebrate the life that Nolan lived while the investigation ensued. But you didn't want to do that. You wanted to accuse and hurl accusations on everybody. And now that the attention and the spotlight is on your client, you don't want to deal with any of that, but instead you want us to just focus on these cute little baby pictures. Let me look. The baby's cute. I can see his mama face in him. He looked just like his mama. Rest in peace, Nolan. We love you. Nolan, this ain't even about you anymore. This is about the civil rights apparatus and the race hustling, race grievance class that has decided to exploit your wonderful and amazing life and would have been amazing legacy for their own selfish gain. And sadly, I believe your mama is part of it. I believe that. If I'm wrong, I will retract. But if she's not a part of the grift and the hustle, why won't she come out and make a statement and shut all this foolishness down? That is the question that you all need to answer, because she's not going to answer it. Listen, at the end of the day, I'm curious to know. I've just basically broken down what we've already demystified and, in my opinion, exonerated these young men and have eliminated them as a suspect. They've retained legal counsel, and the investigation does not point to them having had anything to do with what happened to Nolan. But it also raises other questions. What happened to the phone? Why is it the phone? The phone didn't get included in the forensic. Like, the mama, you still got the phone. Why you won't hand the phone over? Like, that's a big deal. That is a very big deal. These are just questions that I have. And at the end of the day, this could have been avoided if the racial hatred, the idolatry, and the ethnic narcissism that so many people in the Black community suffer from, if they had just laid all of that down, forgiven, put the past behind them, and focused on the facts of this case. But it was too profitable. And too much money has been made off of this race grievance industry. But I believe this was the wrong case for you to pull that, because Ocean Springs, Mississippi is not having it. They are fighting back. And I hope and pray that Ben Crump, Charleston White, Al Sharpton, and maybe even the mama, somebody is going to be held accountable for all of the lies and the conjecture and all of the defamatory statements that have been made to harm innocent people, all in the name of racial grievance. But I'm curious to know whatever it is that you guys think. Leave me your thoughts down in the comments below. And until next time, you guys, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.